Hi all, in this video we will look at SAML SSO authentication. Just a recap from previous video on what we discussed. We have elaborated what all parties are involved in SAML SSO authentication. One of the key parties identity provider and service provider. In our example, a user who is trying to log in into Pega environment via SSO SAML. He hits the Pega SSO URL from the web browser, and then how he gets redirected to the protected resource which is on a Pega environment is the use case which we are going to demonstrate today. And not just about the use case, we are also focusing on how actual configuration is set up at identity provider side and how exactly the configuration is done at Pega environment side, which is acting as a service provider in this case. And also with respect to my previous video, there we have taken an example SAML ID as the identity provider. Just I have got a request to explain it with respect to Azure AD as an IDP, because I think in the recent times everyone is going with Azure AD in the real-time projects. So wanted to give that feeling so that this learnings can be taken to the projects as well. Yeah. Okay, on that note, let's get started. So what I'm going to take you through today is at a very high level. This is the agenda. Like, as part of this, first I'll take you to the configuration that we need to do in Azure portal, which acts as an identity provider, which validates the user's credentials, right? So what is the role of identity provider? It is going to validate the identity of a user who is logging into the system. Right, so service provider will focus on only providing the service, but identity provider will focus on identifying or validating the identity of the users logging in. Right, that's why these IDPs are very famous these days. And the example that we have taken for identity provider in this case is Azure AD. Azure Active Directory is an identity provider. Okay, and the users ID, the user ID which I'm going to take for this demo, the end user is I picked my own Gmail ID. You can also use your own Gmail ID while you're doing the practice, but in reality, in real time, this would be the actual end user's user ID. Okay, you can envision in that way. And login into Pega, right? And also we will log in into Pega, which is a service provider. As a developer, as a Pega sysadmin, we may have to do some changes. Like example, we have to do all the configuration that needs to happen, that needs to go into Pega, right? All that changes we will be doing by picking this particular operator ID, which I have already created in this environment. And this is my local environment, which I have taken. This is a Pega environment, and this is like the basic authentication. So how developer would log in into Pega, needless to explain. We all know that we directly hit the dev URL with the basic authentication. We enter our username and password, then we log in and we do all the configuration that is required for SAML SSO for the end users, right? And now finally, once the configuration of this, the step one at Azure AD side, at the identity provider side, and at the service provider Pega side, then we will take you, then we have to hit the SSO URL, right? And the SSO URL will be slightly different from the actual basic authentication URL. If you see, basic authentication is ending with PRWeb, but SSO URL is having slightly few extra things. But anyways, no need to discuss this at this point. Let's cover the use case and the configuration that we need to focus on first, and then we can go on to this later. And the user ID, yeah, I'm going to, like I said, how I'm going to demonstrate the use case to you, that is via my user ID. Okay. In reality, even this can be picked with this will be done. Azure portal configuration will be done by some administrator of Azure AD. But as of now, since I don't, I'm just using the same email of mine to get that validated. Yeah. Hope that is clear. And just before jumping on to the real demo, one of the prerequisites that we need to have this setup in local or in the actual real environment, HTTPS URL. Pega should be set up on HTTPS. SSL port should be turned on. In my case, I have turned it on by following some steps. Probably you will find one more link where you can follow that if you have to convert HTTP URL to HTTPS to turn on your HTTPS port, basically. Yeah. So that's about the context setting, what we are going to achieve as part of this demo. Let's go and quickly try to follow along. If you feel it's tough or you're not able to, just try to take an advantage, as this is a video, pause and go back, and feel free to do that. Yeah. And now we'll go step by step. We will do the configurations. You will see that within few minutes we'll be done with the configuration at IDP, and we'll be done with the configuration at SP Pega, and we will be able to see the use case. Even if we face one or two issues, we'll also check, or I'll also give you the intuition on how to debug those and how to make that use case working. Okay. Now without any further delay, let me go to a browser, which is, to start with, in Pega. Right now the URL which I have shown, I have already logged in. Probably let me log off and log in once again. Okay, so this is the basic authentication. So this is, I just made a hit and I'm logging in as a Pega user. I just have one more monitor. I'll just make use of that. Trying to log in as a Pega developer. Not focusing much here, as we all know this. Just entered username, password, and the developer would see this Dev Studio developer portal. And then the very first thing that we need to do, that the configuration in Pega, that we have to create a new authentication service which is custom. Alright, probably we'll start here and then we'll go to Azure portal, as we are all Pega developers. Probably just starting here might make more sense. And here I'm just creating one auth service called custom, and which is authentication type as SAML2. The other ones as of now we're not covering. Only SAML2 is the scope of this video or the demo. Creating this, and then you would this will be like very easy to understand. So authentication service alias, I'm just maintaining same, but we can give our own thing, like you can give SSO or some meaningful name. And history, I would like to say this is for custom authentication. I'll say custom SSO authentication for Azure AD. Probably tomorrow there could be more which could be coming onto this platform. That's why I'm just giving a description and usage in a relevant way, so that it can be easily understandable by others. Yeah. Identity provider, we need to, it is asking for this is the main section, I would say. In authentication service, we see IDP information. All this information needs to be filled in by picking the details from Azure AD. So as of now we don't have these details, so for now let's park it. We'll come back to that. Operator identification, this is an interesting part. We will cover that in a while. And service provider settings, this is where we all have to focus. Yeah, so this is the service provider settings. In this case, service provider is Pega, like we were talking about. You see, this is very important. Entity identification, and then assertion consumer service URL. Okay, of course the other things also have their own significance, but in this demo let me highlight this entity identification and assertion consumer service of SP settings, because these are required for configuration. We are going to copy this and then we are going to configure this in IDP. It's more like we have to do the configuration at both the ends. So by picking the details of service provider Pega, we are going to enter these details into Azure AD. Yeah, now let us see how that happens. Right, I'm just taking one more window. You see I have already logged in with my Gmail here. I'll just search for Azure portal. Normally it will be like portal.azure.com, but let me Google it first so that we all can follow the same. Right, so you see the first link, portal.azure.com. Once I click on this, since I have already logged in as with my Gmail account, it's taking me directly to the Microsoft Azure portal. And this is where you, of course, Microsoft Azure in itself is huge and it has so many components, but out of which we are trying to set up only Azure Active Directory. That is our identity provider. We want to leverage this one. Of course, there are a lot more other powerful things which is not in scope of this demo. So I clicked on Azure Active Directory. Right, I'm not sure if you have followed. Just let me come again. So once we landed onto this screen, so on the home screen, on the left side navigation pane, we are clicking on Azure Active Directory, and then we see enterprise applications. So once you click on this enterprise applications, you get to see what are all the applications configured to this particular Azure Active Directory, right? As of now, there is nothing, right? So there is a default directory, Azure Active Directory, and applications, you see the list is empty. So we need to add a new application. For this, I am clicking on this new application in Azure to say that, and here which type of application Azure AD is trying to connect to, in this case Pega system. So it is a Pega type of application. So clicking on this, you see a pop-up on the right hand side, an action panel, and here I would say Pega Onboarding application. Okay, so Pega Onboarding is the name of the application I'm giving, and then it's self-explanatory, and even there is a step-by-step Pega integration tutorial. Even this is very informative. You can also go through this if you feel like, yeah, but it would be more like the similar steps we would be following here, but not like I would be explaining the very basics so that it will look very easy for you. Yeah, I just wanted to go like one level higher so that you will get the feel of the configuration, plus mainly I'm focusing on that concept part, because if you're clear on the concept, it would be very easy for you, not just the configuration. Even tomorrow any issue comes in the project for SSO SAML, you will be able to easily debug that or troubleshoot it. Yeah, that's the motto of this particular video. Now clicking on create, this creates a Pega onboarding application in Azure Active Directory. Why are we creating this? You would understand this once you conceptualize. You will be able to understand more, but for now you think that in Azure AD we came and we started creating a Pega onboarding application, right? Which will serve the basis, like this is where we can start setting up things, right? From Azure AD as an identity provider, it should start interacting with Pega service provider. How that happens? So we just created an application called Pega Onboarding. You see this breadcrumb view here, and then we start doing setup single sign-on. That means, okay, we are doing a single sign-on, and which method? We are choosing SAML, which we are familiar with, right? And in here we have to provide the details. If you see, it is asking for basic SAML configuration details. What is the entity ID? We have seen this some time back. What is the entity ID of our Pega application? Now let me toggle to Pega application. I'm just doing switching my windows, right? And then you see here what is the identification entity identification URL, this one I'm copying. Again I'm switching. I just want to do this one by one. We'll just take baby steps. Yeah, and then let me delete this for some time. Okay, and then we see entity identification URL is filled in, and then assertion consumer service URL. Also we are kind of familiar with this. We have seen this at least. Yeah, of course in detail if we have to go to low level, there is a lot to talk about this, but for now let's remember that as assertion consumer service URL. We picked it from our environment and we are placing it here. So this means we have provided the details, and then we click on save. Then you see those details would be reflected over here. That means in Azure Active Directory IDP side we have configured the URLs of Pega. Now that means Azure AD application has knowledge of Pega URLs, right? All the redirects which we have seen in our first video, how that happens, because we are registering the service provider's details into this identity provider. That is how IDP will know to which to redirect to, or to which URL it should route to, yeah, in the flow. Now again, now attributes and claims, there is a very much importance or very much significance for these claims, but let us keep it simple. There will be few claims which are present, but we'll come back to this. Anyways, we have to touch the basic of that in this video. And SAML signing certificate also, let's not go in detail over there, but there you see federation metadata XML. That means whatever identity provider details are there, we have to pick the identity provider details and we have to register that in service provider in Pega as well, right? That means we have to pick the details of this Azure AD and we have to provide that into Pega. So let me download this federation metadata XML. I just downloaded, and you see an option here. So the file is present. I'm just opening that, so I have a file into my downloads. Now keeping this aside, keeping that aside, now I'll just change to Pega, and then service provider, anyways it is Pega and these are Pega details, so we are kind of clear with that. And now I'll collapse the service provider settings in the auth service. Moving up, identity provider information, either we can open that XML whatever we have downloaded and manually fill in entity identification or ARS location, login location, all of that, but or else the easy option would be import IDP metadata, and via file I am choosing the file which I have just downloaded. Yeah, so this is the file which I just downloaded. So, and we click on submit, you see all the details are populated, entity identification. Importantly, don't go with the, for now let's keep it at a very high level, identity in IDP information. Some of the URLs are already there in the metadata which we have downloaded from IDP, and all of those details got auto populated when we tried to import the IDP metadata. Right? Okay, and just let's read the names. Entity identification issuer, because some of them are self-explanatory. One is login location and then logout location, right? And also certificate also got uploaded, but that's fine. Yeah, we'll keep it very simple for this. So that's it. Now in Pega we have provided all the details of Azure AD, which means in service provider we have provided all the details of identity provider. And now the same thing in identity provider, we have provided all the details of Pega, right? Which means in Azure AD, we have provided all the details of Pega. Now we are able to understand what is identity provider, what is service provider, right? And we are able to, identity provider means Azure AD. Probably I might be using those words interchangeably. And even same thing, service provider means Pega in our scenario. But why are we stressing on that? Today it is about Pega, right? Tomorrow there could be multiple apps which could be involved in this single sign-on, because there is a bigger picture to single sign-on. Of course, we are just talking about configuring single sign-on for one application, but in further videos you would get to see we will be enabling SSO with the same identity provider for multiple applications, so that you log in once, you just not get access to one application, but you get access to all the applications which are in that circle of trust. Yeah, not to complicate it a lot, we'll come back to the actual story that we have one service provider, one identity provider. All we have to remember is service provider is Pega and identity provider is Azure AD. And what we have done, so that identity provider should have an information of service provider, so we have provided that information over here. And service provider should have the information about identity provider, that we have provided it over here in Pega, right? So we are clear with the configuration. Now let me save this one. Yeah, so I'm just saving this, and we see one error. Wherever we are seeing error, just think errors are coming for good and for our learning. A signing certificate for the service provider must be specified unless request signing has been disabled. Okay, ideally in service provider settings, if let's say disable request signing, it is not selected, and you see the certificates are also empty here, right? Like I said, to keep this demo very lightweighted, let me disable the request signing so that I need not to fill in any extra details. Yeah, this is not the recommended approach. In reality, there is a lot of benefits which comes up with signing, but for the demo purpose, just to show you the configuration, how this happens between how the handshaking happens between service provider and identity provider, so that our sequence diagram will make more sense. Whatever we have seen in the first video, the same thing should come out, should reflect in this demo. Yeah, that's the whole intent. Now all the changes are done. So in Pega we have saved, you have seen we have created one authentication service with the name custom, and we have used an alias name. The URL earlier which we have logged in for basic authentication is prweb, and for custom SSO authentication now it will be prweb/prauth/custom. So I have copied this onto a separate screen so that I can use this whenever we are trying to demo the use case for final end user logging into this SSO URL. Okay, this part is done. Now what about Azure AD? Is it everything? Is it done? Like, okay, all the Pega details are entered over here. Claims, anyways, we can leave the defaults, and we have downloaded the XML and we have uploaded. Then that's all. We are all set, right? And then once we test, then we should be knowing what are the issues that might be coming up, right? Either we can use this test functionality, but just before using this test functionality, this is the application we have created, Pega Onboarding in Azure AD, and also what is a user, end user, right? Now we know that identity provider will be storing all the users credentials, right? In this case, let me go and assign some user to this, right? In this case, let me assign my own email ID so that it will be easy for our demo. Yeah, so I clicked on users. As of now, none selected, but I am picking one. Likewise, probably in an organization there will be many users associated to it. Needless to say, identity provider will store the identity of many users, right? Right now, since mine is like very a basic login, and I'm not like an organization who have multiple people, right? As of now, it's like I'm just the only person who is tagged to this account. So let me pick my own account for the end user. So this is my Gmail ID and this is my account, and we have selected this user. So we are saying, okay, we have mapped this particular end user to this application. That means whenever he is coming via SSO, when he wants to access Pega URL, his identity will be verified from here. Yeah, that's why we are mapping him a role. Yeah, and we are clicking on assign. We are done. That's all. We are all set from even AD side. And how will we the configuration at Pega side, service provider side is done, and configuration at identity provider, that is Azure AD, is done. Right now, how will we look at this? Right, so we have the SSO URL. Maybe I'll flash the notepad once again. So this is now we are done with step 1 and step 2. We have logged into Azure portal and we have done the changes. Configuration, we have logged into Pega, we have done the changes, right, with the developer ID. And now how an end user would log into this. In this case, end user whose role is mapped in identity provider is this one, right? Just now, like I said, I'm using my Gmail ID to give a demo on this one. All right, and now I'm taking this SSO URL, and we'll take a new session probably, just to be sure, right? What I'll do is, earlier I was using Chrome. Let me use a fresh session from Firefox. Yeah, I'm using Firefox for a reason. Maybe it's a matter of taste, but you can use any other any other browsers as well. Yeah, so I'm hitting this PR web / PR auth / custom. We all know this is the custom alias URL, right? Our authentication service alias URL, and this is the alias name which we have given. And this is not the basic authentication. We all know this is the SSO SAML authentication URL, which end user would hit it in this way, right? In this case, end user is pawan.sept18@gmail.com, right? That is the end user who is trying to log in into the application. Yeah, just before I go ahead, right? One point. Okay, user would try to log in, but okay, let me show you the thing, and then we'll try to debug that. Okay, and in my case, HTTPS I have enabled with the self-signed certificate. In reality, you would have a real certificate, so you won't get this error or anything. So for now, let me continue. I know this is not a risk because it's a self-signed, so I clicked on it, and then let me change this to my end user ID. Right, this is my end user ID which I am using for this demo. And then the password I'm filling in, you saw. So initially we have made a hit to Pega SSO URL, and then it took us to the identity provider login screen. We are entering username and password, and then we sign in. Right, this is fine. Just yes. Now we got into one error. What is this? Unable to process the SAML web SSO request, unable to derive operator from SAML assertion. That means actually, you know what, probably like we discussed before, there is something, some issue on the screen. We all know. Now how will we debug this? We have a magic wand with us, which is a SAML Tracer, right? This is a plugin which will be there, which can be there in, which is there in multiple browsers. As of now, I'm using a Firefox extension, one of the plugin. And you see this is a SAML Tracer, and it nicely captures the SAML request and response. That's why I always use this. Okay, and even in Chrome also you can do the same. Let us try once again, but this time we have turned on the SAML Tracer. Now it is already tracing. Now I click on this one more time. What happens? In the background, already, since I have already entered my details, it didn't prompt me the credentials, but in the background you can see there is a SAML request and also a SAML response. So this is the SAML request. Okay, we clearly see, and this looks good. And in assertion consumer service, in this particular URL, you see the SAML response. In a way, like you'll also get to know what that good means. Like, okay, even this looks good because I see a SAML response, and also along with this I see some of the details like maybe the email ID and all of that attribute should come back from there, right? So I see, yes, my email ID is also coming from there, which means it's good enough, ideally, right? Now why this is not working, it's not able to derive the operator. Now the question comes, okay, SAML token is coming from the identity provider via browser to service provider, but how will this user ID be mapped into Pega? There are two scenarios. One is like dynamic, on the fly also. Yeah, before going to on the fly dynamic or static, to keep it very simple, these are all the attributes which are coming from identity provider to service provider, yeah, via browser, right? So if you see this closely, every attribute here, this is a repeating list, and each tag you see here is an attribute, and one of those attributes mainly which I am interested in is this attribute. Of course there is a name ID, there is a lot more concept here, but to keep it very simple, there are like list of attributes coming from the Azure AD, and we call them as claims, AD claims, yeah, or else you just remember that as attributes. Okay, SAML response attributes, and I'm interested in this one because the email address is the primary thing with which I can distinguish the users normally, right? So let us pick this particular claim or attribute, right? How can we provide this attribute into Pega? Because with this we have to associate it to an operator in Pega, then this error wouldn't come. As of now it's getting confused, or else we haven't configured anything from the SAML token. What should be mapped, right? What should be mapped onto Pega, right, as a user ID? Now let us finish that configuration also. How we do that? That's exactly where we said we'll come back in a while, right? We were saying some time back that we will come back, right? That is the thing, operator identification. Of course name ID is also there, but like I said, just to keep it simple, let's pick one of the attribute. You see what is the notation to provide an attribute name here? Data page also. Let's hold on to the data page for now, but you see curly brace, so that's how we have to provide the attribute. I copied the attribute name, right, and I'm providing that within the curly brace. That is a syntax. And if we don't have, what we can do is, okay, I'm saving it, and then on the fly also we can create the operator, or we can create the operator manually, right? So what I will do is, in this case, my end user, that is pavan.scept@gmail.com, that user ID, whichever is coming, I can do one thing. I can create that operator ID upfront, right? So that that is a static way of doing it, but in reality there should be a dynamic approach also, yeah, but not showing you the dynamic approach as of now. Let me go ahead and see if I have already created it. Yes, I have already created an operator in Pega. Let's assume that way, so that it's a static profile where it is having access to the onboarding users, right? Onboarding users, that means he is a real end user. Alright, it's already created. Or else we can also choose this to provide a model operator as well. That is very quite easy. If you follow this concept along, that you can do that by yourself also by providing the model operator. For now, just to keep it very simple, I have already created that operator in Pega, and we have mapped the attribute also now. Now once the SAML token comes, Pega shouldn't find it very much difficult, right, to map this attribute. It will pick this attribute, and whatever is there in that attribute, that email ID, with that it will search for the operator ID. If it is there, then it will establish a session with that particular operator ID. Right, now let's see this in action. Now we are done with these changes. Now I'm clicking on save. Only thing is, now just to show you from the start, what I'll do is, let us pick a fresh session now. Yeah, I'm clearing all the caches which are there in Firefox till now. I'm closing this browser and opening it once again, just to ensure that my session is fresh. Yeah. Now let's hit again the use case URL, which is our SSO SAML URL, our Pega URL, and then it nicely and we will open the SAML Tracer also to see this time what's happening. Okay, and we just make a hit, and then it redirected us to the IDP, and you see, let's take a step-by-step view on the SAML Tracer. You see, it redirected us to we started with an SSO URL, and then it made a SAML request, right? I mean, like one of the sequence, you see 1, 2, 3, 4 in our sequence diagram, you can correlate it to that, but ultimately I'm jumping the steps now from login URL of SSO from SP. We are seeing the point where it came to identity provider, a SAML request, and that is when we get to see this challenge or the login screen, and I am just entering my details over here. Yeah, the end user would log in this way, and yes, password, yes, and then I got redirected to, now I should be redirected to the application, right? I think this is the first time I am trying to log into this application, and it's a Cosmos application. That's why it took a while to display this, but this is a user portal, and user's experience would be like this. When he's logging in, when user is trying to log in via SSO URL, so he got redirected to identity provider where he has entered his details, and then those details got validated against the identity provider, and SAML response also got populated. How I can show you that? Again, same, SAML Tracer will serve the purpose over here for you. Like I said, this will be a magic wand. Okay, this is a SAML request which we have seen some time back. You go to SAML, then you see the SAML request, right? And then we go to assertion consumer service. This is a SAML response. Yeah, and at least some of the response you're already familiar with, SAML response, right? The attributes part you're at least clear with as part of this demo. In this, you will see that SAML response, and then the assertion, and then you see attributes. There can be multiple attributes. We just have to choose which attribute we want for the mapping, and we have picked this one for the mapping. But traditionally we'll go with a name ID concept. That is also fine. It's not, if you understand this, that is also not too complex. Yeah, that's what I wanted to give you, an understanding of how we map the attributes from SAML response back to Pega, right? And we just have seen that. That's it. Now we have seen the use case also, right? And I know it will be slightly boring, but just to complete the circle, this is where we started. And now, even if you have missed the first video, now you should be able to correlate with this, because we have seen SAML Tracer as well, right? From web browser, when a user made a hit to a service provider SSO URL, is trying to access the onboarding application of Pega, it redirected the user. That means SP will redirect it to browser. This is very important point. Never think of it like service provider is directly redirecting you to identity provider. No, service provider is redirecting it to browser, and then browser redirects to identity provider Azure AD with a SAML request, and that is exactly what we have seen on the SAML Tracer. And then it presented the login form to the user, right? That's exactly where we entered the credentials on the browser, and then we submitted. Then the details got validated against the underlying directory, a lookup, and then it says it's fine, and then finally it sends the response, SAML response, back to browser. We have seen that again on the SAML Tracer, on the packet, on the XML, right? On the payload, what we have seen, that is a SAML response, or SAML token we call it, and that SAML response ultimately reached back to Pega environment, and then the authenticity is checked, right? And then finally user is able to access the resource. He finally landed onto the onboarding portal, right? So we completed the use case, right? This is exactly what we wanted to cover for this demo, just to keep it very simple, right? So we started with video 1, where to understand the sequence, and in video 2 now we have done a lot of things. We have done the configuration in identity provider, we have done the configuration at service provider, and we have seen how just in a flick of second, when user hits and enters his credentials, all of this, how this is happening in a flick of second, we have seen it. So that sums up the demo. And just to keep you all engaged, what are the next steps, right? Because some of the places I have just told you, like, these are the basic stuff which I wanted to show you in the demo, but it's not just basic. If you are able to conceptualize till this, you will be able to do that for the next steps also, even their advanced level as well, you will be able to catch it up. Yeah. And what is the next part which we have to see? As of now, we have just seen with a static profile. You have seen already I created an operator profile by myself, but you can try that by creating an operator on the fly. Okay, and just as of now I created only one Pega application with the IDP. What if the same identity provider is used for 4 separate Pega applications, or 2 Pega applications and 2 other non-Pega applications? Even then user has to log in only once, then all the others he can be seamlessly redirected to them, right? Even that I am planning to show. That will be very much interesting, and even when we enter that into mashup, it will be much more interesting. We can go step by step. And attributes mapped in detail. Now we have seen not name ID, but we have seen the at one of the attributes, email address, how we have mapped it so that that would be used to identify the operator ID to establish the session, right? But you can pick up more attributes and you can work on them. Again, if I'll see based on the comments or the response, I'll see if I have to explain that. But this is like self-explanatory, but you have questions, you post it in the comments, probably based on that we can take a call. And finally, the most important part is this all configuration in all the projects. I don't think everyone will get a chance. Some of the probably LSAs or PSAs or some of us would be getting this chance, and Azure Active Directory side, probably infra team members would be doing the changes, but probably we may have to guide them, being an LSA or SSA or PSA, whatever it is, right? Ultimately, in production, what if there is some issue with SAML SSO, something is not working, right? A user is not able to log in sporadically. All of that, like we have some kind of scenarios where even in this session, in this demo, we have seen there was an error. How did we approach that? We have taken SAML Tracer, we went step by step, and we have debugged it, right? The approach would be same, just that probably if time permits, we'll look at the multiple other scenarios. We can pick 2-3 scenarios. Probably I can post that and you can try them out, or else if you want us to do that together, probably we can do one more video if that is needed. Yeah, that's all I have. Overall, this is a very interesting topic, and the main intention of mine is not just to explain what is SAML SSO authentication over this one. Now we got a way, like what is the purpose of identity providers. We have understood that, right? And it's not just configuring a single sign-on for one application. It doesn't make sense. Some of you have asked me a question, how come making this for one application is giving a single sign-on experience to user? Absolutely no. If we configure this, let's say in reality, it will be like 3-4 applications would be there. They could be Pega or non-Pega, right? Some of them. Even then, user has to enter credentials only once. Then it gives him or gives the user a single sign-on experience. Yeah, point taken and point agreed, and that means we are going in the right direction, right? And the next part is not just about SAML spec. Even if you pick some other specs in the authentication, the custom authentication, it's all about offloading the authentication from the service provider, right? Identity provider is taking the responsibility of identifying or validating the identity of the users, right? Because service providers these days, let it be Pega or Salesforce, they can all focus on providing the services, right? Identity validating users identity is something which can be done gracefully by identity providers, right? That's why we have that separation, that segregation of stuff, right? Identity validation is done by identity providers, and service providers will focus on providing the services. Yeah, that's a bigger picture. On that note, probably I want to wind up this session. Hopefully that helped. Thank you.